thank you to Ross Greer and the Renfrewshire and Inverclyde branch for their warm welcome to the venue today. It's a great venue, and I want to thank all of the Beacon staff for hosting us today. So it's been a bit of a year. In April, Holyrood lost the stable pro-independence majority government that had been in place since 2021 and got a new First Minister. Since then, we've seen the SNP step away from progressive policies, step back from green budget commitments like free school meals for all primary school children and free bus travel for asylum seekers. Also step back from the abolition of peak fares, which was of so much benefit to workers and students. Can we get a handheld mic, please? Brilliant. Sorry, teams. We're going to play amongst ourselves for a minute while we get the idea out. How's everyone this morning? Delighted to be in Greenock? Awesome. Greenock. Great venue. Is have such awesome venues as this. I see a microphone coming. Okay. "13." That was okay. We're doing fun facts now. I just heard that one briefly. 13 stations. Any other Inverclyde or Greenock fun facts? All right, in the middle. A general election in which the Conservatives finally got kicked out of the UK government. But that general election has political consequences for Scotland that will reverberate for years, for good or for ill. The political landscape in Scotland is shifting. In September, Green MSPs hosted a debate in the Scottish Parliament on the 10th anniversary of the independence referendum. The catalyst for the green surge that got me, and I know many of you, involved in Scottish politics, inspired by a vision for a fairer and greener Scotland. It was a moment where big change and a better future felt possible. Our challenge in these changed political times is to keep that hope for a better future alive and real. Just 2 weeks ago, we forced a significant U-turn from the Scottish government and got them to recommit to free bus travel for asylum seekers in Scotland. You may remember Patrick announcing the policy at our last autumn conference in Dunfermline. Yet only 3 months ago, the SNP said that they were dropping it. This shameful attempt to go back on the promise they had already made would have been a betrayal of some of the most marginalized people in our society. The Scottish Greens have demonstrated that not only can we be an effective and constructive opposition party, but we are able to take on the greater challenge of being in government, facing the responsibilities and difficult decisions that are a necessary part of governing. Indeed, the other opposition parties, throughout our time in government, and even now, loudly bemoan how influential we've been. The Greens are running the show, they complain. The Greens are setting the agenda. The Greens are driving budget decisions. Thank you for noticing. The truth is that the Scottish Greens are the only party that is committed to delivering the kind of change and the scale of change that is so badly needed. I am deeply proud of what we achieved during our time in government. From free bus travel for all of our young people, to the biggest expansion of the living wage and the Scottish child payment since devolution. Scotland's first emergency rent freeze and eviction protections during the cost of living crisis. Bans on polluting behaviors like incineration, single-use plastics, and disposable vapes. Increased multi-year funding for nature restoration and active travel. Policies that you, our Scottish Green members, decided on at past conferences were being put into action, making people's lives better day in and day out. In or out of government, we are committed to delivering the change that Scotland needs. After years of campaigning, both inside and outside of Parliament, by my colleague Gillian Mackay and grassroots organisations, safe access zones finally came into force around Scotland's abortion service providers. Being able to access reproductive care free from abuse or harassment is a basic fundamental right. But in recent years here in Scotland, too many women have been forced to face down a cruel gauntlet of graphic banners and megaphones just to access the health care that they are entitled to. Thanks to the brave women and healthcare workers who shared their difficult and traumatic experiences, and to Gillian for gathering cross-party support, these protests outside hospitals will now be a thing of the past in Scotland. Some of the measures put in place while Greens were in government, things we worked very hard on, will see benefits in the future and for decades. Licensing of grouse moors will compel more responsible management and reduce wildlife crime. The ban on many single-use plastics and disposable vapes will lead to reductions in plastic found on our beaches and in our parks. The Circular Economy Bill will allow regulations to be brought in to tackle other single-use plastics, like single-use coffee cups, and shift society towards reuse. It is a worry to me that without the Scottish Greens in the room, the SNP will cower away from the real actions that are needed to tackle climate change and the nature emergency. We in this room know. Young people and climate activists across Scotland know. We need big changes in how we manage land, how we travel, how our homes and buildings are heated. Scottish Greens in Parliament and in councils across the country will keep saying this, keep working to make it happen. Within this term of Parliament, we have several significant bills still to come. The Housing Bill with its rent controls and heat in buildings, also land reform, community wealth building, a natural environment bill, not forgetting, of course, Mark Ruskell's members' bill to ban greyhound racing. Rent controls in particular are something that Patrick and I feel strongly about. I know many of you in this room share this feeling. Getting rent controls into the Butte House Agreement and then initiating legislation for them has been a significant achievement of the Scottish Greens. All of us agree that Scotland is facing a housing emergency. Many of you have first-hand experience of rents increasing suddenly, often by more than inflation, making it harder and harder for young people and tenants to keep a roof over their head and pay their bills, making it harder to get ahead in life because it is hard to pay for training or to save up or to take time out to care for others when your rent takes more and more of your pay packet. Rent controls are normal. They exist in many parts of Europe and beyond. They must exist in Scotland too. With my colleagues, Maggie Chapman and Ariane Burgess, leading our housing work in Parliament and holding the government to account, Green MSPs will be doing everything we can to ensure that the housing bill is not watered down, that the rights and well-being of tenants are finally put first. That is how we build a fairer system and how we can protect tenants and ensure that homes are for living in and not profiteering. There are opportunities ahead in the land reform and natural environment bills to try and push the Scottish Government further, to work to prevent these bills from being watered down and the measures in them delayed or underfunded. This is harder to do from opposition, but the Scottish Greens have a good track record when it comes to defending our green and wild spaces. I am so proud of my colleague Ross Greer's campaign here in the west of Scotland to protect the iconic landscape of Loch Lomond and defend public access to nature over private profit of Flamingo Land. He galvanized local support to ensure this became the most objected to planning application in Scottish history, with over 150,000 people lodging objections. Well done. The community was united against these mega resort plans, and now the National Park Authority has rejected planning permission. After 8 long years of campaigning, Flamingo Land has been beaten for good. People power finally won. We had another long-awaited victory this summer defending Scotland's nature over in Stirling, where my colleague Mark Ruskell has worked with the local community for more than a decade to fight plans for a luxury development at Park of Cllr near Dunblane. This ancient woodland site should have been protected by Greenbelt legislation, and proposals for luxury housing and a private sports club were rejected twice by the local council, yet government ministers called the application in and overturned the local democratically made decision. Finally, though, this summer, people power won out, and the developers were forced to admit that the plans were not feasible and walked away from them. I am very much still hoping that the Natural Environment Bill will contain the legislation needed to designate Scotland's 3rd national park in Galloway. This would be a huge boost for communities in the south of Scotland, and my gratitude goes out to the local Scottish Green members in Dumfries and Galloway who played a part in the successful campaign to make Galloway the chosen location. This is only happening because you, our Scottish Green members, campaigned for it during the 2021 election, and we were able to get it into the Butte House Agreement. There is still a lot of work to do to ensure that people in Galloway understand what the park will mean for them and get their say in how their park would work. It distresses me how much misinformation is out there. There is a key role here for all Scottish Greens, whether elected representatives or local volunteers, to make sure communities have accurate information, chances to ask questions, and the opportunity to shape their own future. Our amazing group of local councillors are shaping the future of communities all across Scotland. In the last 6 months, we've seen Scottish Green councillors, not just Scottish Green councillors, but young Green councillors, take up historic leadership positions for the first time, with Luna Martin in Argyll and Butte and Christopher Leask in Orkney taking up spokesperson and community chair roles in the council. In Edinburgh and Glasgow, our two councillor groups have led the way in delivering local visitor levies for their cities, with my home city of Edinburgh set to become the first place in the whole of the UK to roll out a visitor levy in 2026. This important tax power was secured by our MSPs in Holyrood, but it's taken Scottish Green councillors in our town halls and city chambers to make it happen. It is a vital step forward in giving councils the powers they desperately need to raise money and make their own spending decisions. We've also seen our hardworking lone councillors fighting cuts to local libraries, swimming lessons and bus services in East Lothian, Stirling and North Lanarkshire. Whilst in Shetland, Alex Armitage has brought the fight against global fossil fuel companies into the council chambers as he continues to lead the local campaign to stop Rosebank oil fields. These are just a few of the achievements of our Scottish Green councillors in recent months. There really are too many to mention. But it's fair to say we are all deeply proud of our local champions, fighting for people and planet in our communities. So thank you to every single Green councillor for the change you are making and the change and community leadership that you are showing every single day. And thank you to all of you who get out and campaign, who knock on doors, who organize meetings and canvassing, and who make it possible to get so many Scottish Greens elected. We are heading into a new election cycle in Scotland at a time when the tectonic plates in Scottish politics are shifting. The Scottish Greens are a proudly progressive party. We are the only party that has a clear understanding of the urgency of the climate and nature emergencies. We know we cannot drill our way out of a climate crisis. And that's why we're the only party who will say clearly and unequivocally that there must be no new oil and gas licenses in our North Sea. We are the only party who speak honestly about taxation, about taxing the rich and the polluters to properly fund local authorities and public services. Only the Scottish Greens talk about ending public subsidies for environmental destruction, about building an economy and a food system that is fair and sustainable. We are unfailing in our support for our LGBTQ+ siblings. Trans rights are human rights. We want to create a more compassionate politics and end the hostile environment against migrant communities and refugees. We will never give up on our vision of a fairer, greener, independent Scotland inside the EU. We know that voters appreciate green values and leadership. They told us so at this year's general election, which saw record Scottish Green results up and down the country. Whilst Rishi Sunak couldn't even muster an umbrella, our activists pulled off our biggest on-the-ground campaign since before the pandemic, a substantial effort on short notice. In the record 44 seats in which we stood, we nearly doubled our vote share, with over 92,000 people casting their vote for us and demonstrating support for the Scottish Greens all over Scotland, including the islands. In our biggest cities, we are now the third party, beating the Tories and the Lib Dems in their biggest election. How did we do it? Through your hard work and determination, and our positive vision for how green values and policies can change this country. In the next few months, branches will begin selecting their target wards and candidates and start looking ahead to Holyrood 2026. I am glad that the Scottish Greens are being recognised as influential. And we can do even more with more of us elected into Holyrood. Whilst the SNP lurch to the right and court the votes and donations of big oil, and Labour continue to support nuclear weapons and Tory fiscal rules that leave the rich getting richer and public services crumbling, the Scottish Greens will stand on a boldly progressive platform of real change. We have a clear position. We have a big opportunity. And we have all of you. Members, volunteers, and branches getting the word out, knocking on doors, supporting your candidates, and being active in your communities to get more Scottish Greens than ever before elected in 2026 and 2027. Let's do this. I will now hand you over to Tennant's champion, legendary Doctor Who fan, and my lovely co-leader, Patrick Harvie.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. An immense pleasure, as always, to follow Lorna at our party conference and to say hello to you all again. And in particular, thanks to Lorna for reminding us of the extraordinary work that went into delivering some amazing election results just this year. And Greens always offer an inspiring and a positive vision when it comes to elections, because fundamentally we believe that politics is capable of making our society a better place, of changing society and the economy for the better. And that belief contrasts sharply with what Labour had on offer. They spent the entire election campaign trying to lower everybody's expectations. Maybe they thought it was better to under-promise than to risk under-delivering, and yet somehow they've managed to do both at the same time. I don't think there can be a single voter left in the UK who can honestly say they've been inspired by what they've seen from the new Labour government since then. Of course there's good reason to be happy about seeing the back of 14 years of Tory austerity, of their corruption, their downright lies, to be rid of Boris Johnson and his pals partying in Downing Street, or the shameless profiteering on the back of Brexit and the pandemic, or the Liz Truss blink and you miss it catastrophe. It's no wonder at all, of course, the British public jumped at the chance for a change of government. But Labour's offer to the electorate, after they dumped every remnant of a radical programme and purged their progressive candidates, it was left so insipid that I and other Greens were warning the UK was likely to get a change of government without a change of politics. And that's exactly what we've seen from Keir Starmer's Labour since then. We've just passed the 100-day mark of the Labour government. And what have they achieved in that time? Well, Keir has some lovely new suits. And if you can believe it, thousands of pounds worth of quite boring glasses. Some of the cabinet have had some lovely holidays and Taylor Swift tickets. But have they lifted the cruel two-child benefit cap that's forced families, and especially women and children, into poverty? Perish the thought. Have they cut the artificial link between gas and electricity prices, instantly making renewable home heating cheap and affordable for millions? Of course they haven't. Instead, what they've done is to remove winter fuel payments from nearly 10 million pensioners, forcing vulnerable older people to choose between heating their home and feeding themselves. It's a decision that's up there with the worst of the Tories. It's a decision that will kill people. And unlike so many of their other bad ideas, this one wasn't even in the Labour manifesto. Our message to Keir Starmer is simple. Reverse this cut. Do it now, or your first year's legacy will be a cold and deadly winter. They are setting out like a Labour government working for the few, not the many. A Labour government standing up for a broken status quo and for the interests of big business and their corporate donors instead of working people. And here in Scotland, Anas Sarwar told us to read his lips, promising there would be no austerity under Labour. Anas was probably hoping that he'd be able to enjoy a long Labour honeymoon and let him coast much of the way to the 2026 election. Instead, people have been reminded, given an instant reminder, of just how underwhelming a Labour government can be. 2 weeks ago, Labour MSPs had the chance to take a different path. They had the chance to condemn their London colleagues' decision to means test the winter fuel payment in a vote in the Scottish Parliament. Instead, they doubled down, standing up for Starmer's decision and supporting one of the cruelest cuts for years. But it has to be said, perhaps Labour's most shameful failure has been on the international stage. The last 12 months have seen daily horrors and atrocities inflicted on the people of Gaza. So many children, so many whole families wiped out, lives destroyed in some of the gravest war crimes in living memory. It's been the collective punishment of millions of people, and the killing has spread to Lebanon, and now missile attacks between Israel and Iran, with Netanyahu deliberately increasing the risk of a wider regional war. For the international community, this has been one of the most profound moral tests of our age, and it's one that Labour has failed badly. When hospitals and homes have been bombed into rubble and genocide is being inflicted, we all have a moral duty to stand against it and to stand on the side of humanity. Yet Keir Starmer can't even bring himself to end the political and military support for Israel or to take action even against its most extreme far-right politicians. Every government is under a moral obligation to do everything possible to oppose the atrocities. That's why in the Scottish Greens we have consistently called on the Scottish Government to block all public contracts for companies that are complicit in the illegal settlements in the West Bank, while we've called for an end to public grants and support for the companies that are profiting from the killing. But even ending arms sales and the bombing isn't enough, because peace requires justice. And that means an end to the decades of occupation, and it means statehood for Palestine. So, conference, it is long past time to end the complicity. It's long past time for a watertight arms embargo, long past time for an end to all trade with the illegal settlements in the occupied territories. It is long past time for Scotland and the UK to join the call for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, because profiteering from atrocities must have no place in a civilized society. The months and years ahead will be crucial for peace. They will also be crucial for the fate of our planet. With global temperatures rising, governments must take bold and urgent action, both here in Scotland and around the world. And with just 18 months left of this current parliamentary session in Scotland, the SNP now face some key tests on an issue that they still claim is a priority. The first of those tests is already underway as the Holyrood Parliament considers the Scottish Government's new climate bill. Now, the first two climate change acts were statements of high ambition. This third one is an admission that, as Greens have long argued, Scotland is years behind where we should be. That is an admission that needs to be made. But making it demands an urgent acceleration of action here and now, not just promises of more climate plans to come. When we last met in April, I said that Scotland has been held back by too many politicians who are ready to celebrate supposed world-leading targets while blocking the action that's needed to actually meet them. And we've known for decades how to do it. It's about getting people out of cars and onto clean, affordable public transport, replacing fossil fuel for home heating with cheap, abundant renewables, changing the way we manage our land and farm our food so we lock up more carbon than we produce, and ending the extraction of oil and gas in the North Sea for good. But what have we seen in the last 6 months from the now minority Scottish Government? Instead of accepting that missed targets demand accelerated action, they've chosen a sharp U-turn on so much of the action that the Greens had been advancing. Cutting the funding for climate projects and net zero investment, returning to exorbitant prices on our railways, rolling back on the new clean standards for home heating. These are not the actions of a government that is serious about climate action. And on some key climate policy areas, they're simply stalling. A new energy strategy is already long overdue. They said it was ready to publish before the UK election, but we're still waiting months later. Greens had insisted on a climate assessment of their road building plan for the A96, and it's been sitting on ministers' desks too, unpublished. They need to come clean, publish that assessment, and then make a decisive shift in their investment priorities from unsustainable road building to green, low-carbon infrastructure that Scotland needs. And while this dithering and inaction continues, the experts around the world, including Jim Cllr of the IPCC, are now warning not only could 1.5 degrees of warming be moving out of reach, but that potentially the world could be heading to more than 3 degrees of global warming in this century, if we carry on with the policies that we have at the moment. 3 degrees plus of warming would be catastrophic for life on this planet. We know what we have to do, yet the Scottish Government is refusing to take some of the most basic steps. So the Scottish Greens will not wave through the Climate Targets Bill in the Scottish Parliament as a minor technical amendment, as the Scottish Government have actually had the nerve to call it. When Parliament goes back next week, Mark Ruskell and I will move amendments to the bill to try and improve it where we can. We'll try to keep the interim targets alive as crucial milestones on our path to net zero. We'll put forward amendments on the timescales that are set out in the bill, because as it stands, they risk wasting most of the time that's left till the next Holyrood election without an agreed climate plan being in place. But the thing is, outside of the text of what's in that bill, what's really needed now is an immediate programme of accelerated action to deliver the emission cuts that are long overdue. And a climate plan is only going to be worthwhile if it takes the steps that are necessary, like halting new road building projects, like investing in public transport, and refusing the plan to expand the gas-fueled power station at Peterhead. These are just some of the actions that we put forward as part of our climate reset package that we published in August. Now, even those plans aren't the end of the story, not by a long way. But without these kind of changes right now, the Scottish Greens can't vote for the new climate bill. Our demands for climate action, though, don't end just with that legislation. Tackling the climate emergency has to be a mission across all parts and all levels of government, and nowhere is this more pressing right now than the upcoming budget. We do recognise the incredible challenges that come with the limitations of devolution and the impact of 14 years of Tory cuts and now what looks like continued austerity under Labour. And we know that our full ambition for a fairer, greener economy can best be delivered with the powers of a normal, independent country. But we've also been clear in recent months that we still have a duty to use every last lever possible to solve the current crisis in Scotland's public finances. Now, on Wednesday, the UK government is going to publish its budget, and that'll give us a better idea of the financial situation that Scotland faces. Labour could and should choose to end austerity and restore Scotland's budget to workable levels. But given their track record, I don't think any of us are holding our breath for that. Even the current rumours of an increase in capital spending won't take us anywhere near the levels of investment that are needed. And UK ministers have openly been lobbying against the public service cuts that they are being instructed to make. Now, there are those in Scottish politics who refuse the responsibility to offer solutions. Instead, they demand the impossible, pretending that every tax can be cut and every service funded, and they never need to make the sums add up. That's dishonest politics, and it's never been the Green approach. The Scottish Greens have been honest about needing to raise more money through fair taxation if we want to support public services. And we're proud, I'm proud, that we have the most progressive tax system anywhere in the UK. That's because of the work of Green activists and Green members in this hall and across the country, and our work in Parliament. That's why there's an extra £1.5 billion going into public services every year. It's why councils are now able to raise more tax from second homes and the tourism industry. We'll continue to ensure that the Scottish Government has to come good on the commitments that we secured to introduce new local taxes, such as on cruise ships and carbon emissions from land. And we'll hold them to account on the long overdue commitment for wider reform of local government finance. It's one of the biggest missed opportunities for the first 25 years of the Scottish Parliament, and it's one where the SNP are still dragging their feet. We've shown as well how we could make big savings by stopping tax breaks to wealthy landowners or enterprise grants to arms companies, and by bringing in more money to support our healthcare system through a public health levy on supermarkets. But these kind of steps are only the start. Extra funds that are raised through tax or coming from the UK government must go into reversing the broken promises made by the SNP government since they ended the Butte House Agreement. And that includes reinstating the plan to roll out free school meals to all children in Scotland's primary schools before the next election, restoring the Scottish Greens Nature Restoration Fund, fully funding an ambitious programme to cut energy bills and emissions from our home heating, and reversing the decision to bring back peak rail fares which punish workers and students. Crucially, though, John Swinney also has to address the very real issue of the trust that was broken this year. In the last 6 months, we've not only seen Butte House Agreement policies facing the axe, but commitments that were agreed even before we entered government, as well as commitments that were made to local government. And now, for the first time in 4 years, we're being asked to back a Scottish government budget without a role in overseeing how it's implemented. So, to vote on the basis of trust. That's a risk that we can't take lightly. Later today, our finance portfolio lead, Ross Greer, will open a conference debate calling on the Scottish Government to guarantee that no future agreements will be subject to in-year cuts. But even with that in place, we still face a challenging few months ahead. As Green MSPs, we have a responsibility to engage with the budget process in good faith and with honesty. But as the only party that ever brought down an SNP budget, as John Swinney remembers to his cost, we need to be clear that they cannot take our votes for granted. Friends, this budget does mark a turning point, not just because of the incredibly difficult circumstances and the challenges facing the country, but also because it's the last full year's budget of the current parliamentary session. In just 18 months, Scotland will go back to the polls. Voters will make a decision that will be crucial to ensuring a sustainable and livable future for our planet and for the people of Scotland. Now, we've made really important progress for Green politics in recent years, a string of best ever election results at every level, from the 2019 European elections onward. We've seen our first opportunity to enter government and sustained high polling, even through turbulent times when the political right threw everything they had at us. And despite the end of the Butte House Agreement, we still have a very clear role and opportunity to ensure delivery of what we got started and to hold the SNP to account for progressive green policies that they choose to drop, demonstrating to voters the reason why green votes make a difference. But if we want that 2026 election to continue this string of election successes and turn our potential into a reality, we need to keep learning, keep developing, and becoming the effective and professional political force we're capable of being. As a movement, Greens don't exist for easy times. We are here to draw attention to the profound challenges that our society faces, from environmental destruction to poverty and inequality, from global threats to democracy to the abuse of power by those who operate today's failed economic model for their own short-term benefit. Lots of politicians talk about tough choices. What they really mean is sticking with the consequences of the status quo. They make brutal choices, but easy ones. It's easy to hurt the most vulnerable. That's the path of least resistance. It's far easier than challenging the powerful. Greens exist to take on the really tough choices, the choice to change our society, our economy, and our politics, knowing that it's not an easy path. Our party will do that and will earn the trust of those who know it needs to be done if we are united, true to our values, politically disciplined, and honest. And if we keep on working hard, knocking on doors, campaigning in our communities, and making green change happen at every level. That's what we are. That's why we are here. To be more than just a political party, to be a movement for people, a movement for planet, a movement for peace, and a movement that is needed now more than ever. Thank you very much. Okay. Good stuff. Okay.